Yeah, g'day everyone and welcome back to the TryPod Live with Clarkey and Winnie. We are now live on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, live everywhere. Please bear with me with my voice, guys. It has been a huge Magic Round weekend. Winnie, how good was it, brother? How are you going?
Yeah, it was fantastic. Thanks, mate. The occasion, that is, not the bet results, which I'll get to in a moment. We're trying to do a short, rapid reaction to the weekend. I mean, I already feel like round 12's upon us, and we're going to be back in less than 24 hours to preview it. So we could talk all night about how good the occasion was. But I had the punt party, and you came to the first couple of hours, which was fantastic to catch up with a lot of members of the TryPod community. Special mention, Jeff, Dan, the best admins in the game, Toppy making the event possible. Mate, you've got someone out. Shout out to Josh. You caught Josh out, who came in fancy dress. People might be amused to know that one. But what about your experience, mate? Because you actually attended all 3 days. Hopefully people didn't give you too much grief around the grounds.
Well, actually 4 days because I went to the Women's Origin as well, which I thought that was really good scheduling by the NRL to take advantage of a location where all footy fans are and have the women's product on full display there. I thought that was awesome. The punt party was a real highlight on Sunday as well. So thank you to yourself, the admins, for organising that, and as well Top Sport for their support of the day. So cool to, meet people that's comments we see roll up every single week. So I found that really, really cool. All righty, Magic Round, it's come and gone another year. Would you make any changes to it moving forward, or are you happy with it in its current state?
Oh, look, I think it's that great. It's going to be in Brisbane for a few more years, right? Brisbane does it so well. The vibe around the city was amazing. I think more and more people want to go. The demand only gets higher. I wouldn't necessarily change it, but if I had to choose, I would almost say do 2 a year and let Brisbane have one ongoing, and maybe take it to another city, see how it goes in a Melbourne, an Auckland, something like that. What about you? Would you change anything?
Yeah, I think on one hand, I'd love to see it in Sydney as well, being, kind of the two
Sydney
major
too, yeah.
states. It makes complete sense there to do it at like the Accor precinct. But then I'm also worried that if you do 2 Magic Rounds every year, do you take away from that build up for the one special round? So if I had to make the call, I'm actually going to say keep it exactly how it is. It's perfect. Footy needs to remain the main product. Like, we don't want to go having singers and performance and stuff like that. Just keep the footy as the product. It's amazing how it is in Brisbane. And if we do have one in Sydney, I'd like to see it be the NRLW, actually. I reckon that'd be a cool way to grow the women's game as well. That'd be a fun weekend also. All right, mate, let's get into it game by game.
Let me address the bets as well, and then we'll go game by game. But it's another losing weekend. What's new, right? I really look at it now that 11 in the books, but if you count round 0, you could say we had a good first month followed by 2 bad months, as bad as it's ever been. And this round, 1 and 2 on the best bets, lost the mixed matchup, didn't get a multi up. And again, I'll talk about the game where you're that far in front, you're like $1.10 or shorter to win our $7 multi on Friday night. Not a lot going my way. I don't want to sound deranged, like everything's going against me, because not everything did. I will talk about some luck that was involved in breaking the best bet losing streak on Sunday at least. But I tell you what, I'm setting all sorts of records. I mean, the amount of tries against best bets this year by teams returning dropped balls is just insane, including the very first 2 of the round. I'm also think I might set a record for the number of players that get sin binned for blatant cheap shots. If I've got a best bet on their team, they will lose their mind and they will just go out and get themselves sin binned and cost us the bet. And you know what's really funny too? I think you look at the 3 teams I took this weekend. I definitely maintain that these are not all terrible tips. They're terrible results, but they're not terrible tips. It's like you walk into the roulette tables at the casino, mate, and you're going to see 15 out of 18 has been red versus black. It doesn't necessarily mean that the wheel is slanted and that it's going to continue that way. You will just get extreme runs. So I think the tips have not been nearly as bad as the results. And it's just funny how punting works out, because I really think I would happily ride the Bulldogs -3.5 again. I would happily ride the Tigers +11.5 again. Probably the bet I wouldn't want again, having watched the game, would be Parramatta. And that's actually the one that gets up, because I did have the first half line. But again, we'll get to it game by game, and I can discuss, where it all went wrong, but as also what we took away in a shorter, sharper pod tonight.
Yeah, I think we'll go through game by game. I'll talk about it just generally. You talk about it from the punting perspective, like we usually do, but we'll keep it rapid on the recap. Alrighty, let's go to the Raiders v Bulldogs. The Raiders get up 24 points to 20. For me, I thought the Dogs' best period was really during the sin bin period there for the Raiders, where they had 2 off the field. We kind of saw the inexperience of that Bulldogs spine. We've spoken about on this show for, I want to say, like at least definitely last year as well, right? That the Bulldogs spine, it's missing a halfback and it's missing a genuine fullback. And so it puts additional pressure on these guys like Matt Burton and Reed Marnie to do more. And for them to allow the Raiders back into the game, I can only really put that down to inexperience by their halves and spine. Because Drew Hutchinson's first half wasn't actually too bad, but just the fact they didn't ice the game out from there is pretty bad. Meanwhile, for the Raiders, they literally do what they always do. They stay in a dogfight. They'll be in that dogfight for 80 minutes, whether they've got 11 on the field or 13, and they'll drag you into that play style. And if your halves and spine don't have the experience to say, hold on, we're not playing our style of footy here, we're getting involved with the arm wrestle, and use that experience to shift that momentum, the Bulldogs just got dragged into a dogfight that they cannot win against the Raiders. The Raiders are the best at it. They made the top 8 last year doing it somehow. And in the famous words of James Graham, they put one through the back of them. What do you make of this game, mate? No doubt a bit of a roller coaster with a best bet riding.
Yeah, felt pretty good about it going into the game. That was my one best bet that I picked out on the Tuesday show. Had Bulldogs -3.5. What else is new? The line closes 4.5 for the game. And then when you're down on your luck, like how's the start of this game? The first try, you talk about like not having a star at fullback. How about just someone that can catch the ball? That'd be a good start. So Tracy spills it. And it's like one thing to drop the ball because you can defend that. But when you drop it into their lap and they run it in and score under the post, okay, that's 6-0. But then not long after that, the Bulldogs get a scrum and it's first tackle and like one pass off the ruck and the ball runner's jammed, spills it again straight into the arms of a Raider and it's 12-0. Like these are the I'll never get the amount of tries that have been against best bets this year. I won't get that punting for the next 2 years, in my way, what we've had in kind of the last 2 months. So 12, then all of a sudden you're in a hole that you've got to climb out of. But to be fair, what kind of hurts as well is that the Bulldogs do come back. Now, big part of the Bulldogs fighting back into this game is clearly the sin bins. So it is pretty lucky that at some point in the game, the Bulldogs were playing 13 on 11. Like that's pretty extreme. So and on top of that, there was also a pretty fortunate Bulldogs try where there's a grubber in behind and 2 Raiders collide. So I kind of say that there's a try that cancels out for each team. But again, the Raiders scored both their tries extremely fortunately. Then you get the 2 sin bins, but it's like the sin bins are fair enough. Papali does a hip drop on kick out, injures him. Kick out was not the same when he did come back on the second half, killed the Dogs. And Rapana has denied scoring opportunities not once but twice in the game and probably also deserved to be off for 10 minutes. If the Dogs are going to look back at this match, there's only so much you can do about giving up the 12-0 start, with those type of errors. I hate to use the word, but it is pretty damn unlucky. Maybe the Bulldogs will feel they needed to put Canberra to the sword more so when they had the man advantage, but I think the Dogs did score at least 2, if not 3. I think it was 2 tries before halftime and another after halftime, which actually meant the Dogs were out in front by 8. I mean, even when the Dogs were up by 2 at halftime, the Raiders were $10 in the run, live betting, down 2 points. So the Doggies are like $1.05 to win the game. They extend the lead by 8. I do think that I could sense that it could swing back, and I do think those mistakes by Kickout were just killers. Then they're on the Raiders line. He goes into dummy half and just spills it into the man playing the ball, and the Raiders scored the next time they touched it. But to close it, I suppose, the Raiders don't know when they're beat, do they? They're down 20-0 against Manly. So, you have to give a great deal of credit for the fight that's in this team. I know it was a big occasion. What was it, like the 30-year anniversary of the 94 premiership, and the whole team travelled up. But still, the Dogs have got to be able to find a way to win that. So, again, you're let down by your halfback, key position players at times. And, again, you get -3.5. It closes 4.5, which is perfect when it lands 4, except it actually lands 4 to the Raiders. So maybe that great start was ultimately too much to overcome, but the Dogs were knocking on the door right at the end. And probably the last thing I'd say, to refer to James Graham's comment, which is on the screen, is like Matty Burton misses a couple of kicks. Rapana, who's a part-time kicker, is 4 from 4. And, you even change like one or two of them. The Dogs got a penalty late, but down 4, you've obviously can't take the 2. If even one of those kicks is different, then you could level up the score. And the same gamer, I mean, how cruel is this? We had Kiraz to score, he scores. We had the Dogs to be in front at 60 minutes. They were in front at 60. They were not in front at 61. So you had the lead. And you needed the Dogs to have more tries than the Raiders, so the missed conversions didn't matter at all. And the Dogs were leading 4 tries to 2, but Canberra gets the final 2 tries of the game, and it ends a 4-all draw. We don't get the same gamer either. So what a start for the round in terms of my punting. Like, fantastic for the neutrals, as many of these games were. But yeah, a tough watch for me, especially the way it finished up.
Yeah, really tough. I mean, it's one of those games you go, the Dogs are still an improving side, so you kind of expect that inconsistency across an 80-minute performance with some solid patches. And then for the Raiders, you gave them credit. I'll give them credit as well. The fact they've lost their halfback and have completely reversed up their game plan from earlier this year when they were smoking teams. Really, really impressive stuff by them there. Alrighty, Sea Eagles versus Broncos. Sea Eagles go down by a field goal, 12 points to 13. Interesting game for me. Both sides came into it without their star fullbacks, talking Tom Trbojevic and Reece Walsh. Once the news that Walsh was out actually did drop, I did prefer Manly at the line, but it crunched in very, very tight to what it was. I think it about halved, which was a bit risky, I thought, with Manly's recent form, letting sides back into the game. But they still did have a classy lineup that included some like DCE there. Really, it's another tight loss for Manly, and a loss that was winnable. I'm not saying that all these tight losses they've had this year, or that when teams have come back, they should have won. I'm just saying the game was there for the taking. And so that's why I think Manly will just be a little bit short of the top 8 this year. They'll finish in that 9th to 12th range, just missing out by a few points. They'll look back at all these games and just think, what if? Like, those were all winnable. They were there. But my biggest takeaway from this game is actually around an individual, and that was Selwyn Cobbo. Super handy, man. Like, he shifts to fullback on short notice, hasn't trained there all week, hasn't played there for a couple of seasons, and just did it seamlessly. Like, he was awesome in this game. Tackle breaks, big run meters. And I think he's probably put himself above Murray Taulagi now in Origin, without a doubt. Like, they could have been pretty even before, given how good Taulagi played, especially defensively last year. But just having 2 centers in, I'm going to say the Hammer, and I'm going to say Cobbo even, works because they can play fullback, they can play wing, they can play center. There's real versatility to them at the moment. What does your Maroons backline look like currently, just out of interest?
So I probably would also put Cobbo ahead of Taulagi on a wing, right? And then I'd definitely pick Xavier Coates, and then the Hammer will be my left center. I'd go Val Holmes, maybe left center, Hammer right center. Sure. Obviously Walsh at fullback, and then I was going to ask you who would be your 5/8 now in lieu of the devastating Munster news.
Yeah, I reckon Tommy Dearden, and I reckon you push Ezra Mam to 18th man.
I think I would have Mam slightly ahead, but Dearden does have the runs on the board, doesn't he? Billy trusted him, in a decider. And I suppose the Cowboys got back on track. Did you have a different Queensland backline to me?
No, I agree with your backline there. I just think that if Cobbo keeps playing well in the centre, it could actually force Valentine Holmes out. And if Taulagi was to play well, he could take back that wing spot as well. So nothing is settled in that Maroons backline yet.
No, a bit to think about too, because it's the beauty of playing 2 players that do play side by side in club as well. Like whether you want to split up Taulagi and Val Holmes, and they were both on the most recent Kangaroos tour, but some like Cobbo, his form may be undeniable, and also of course showing versatility is that someone like Taulagi, you couldn't exactly slot him to fullback if needed, but clearly Cobbo you can. Now this game, I mean, it just continues. I didn't have a bet on it, and I am giving some reasonable advice along the way. Like I know people are telling me you just play Brisbane and you get in the queue to cash another winner, but like Brisbane didn't cover the line this game. They didn't score a lot of points, and so the people that think Brisbane's an automatic win every week will say, "Oh, yeah, but Walsh was out." But whenever I went against Brisbane when Walsh was out, they still found a way. Like, you go back and look at the games where I've gone against Brisbane, and they're the Harlem Globetrotters, And then if I'm not against them, they can't get to 20 points. And that happened against the Roosters. And of course, there's excuses in that game. And it happened again in this one. And I don't know if I'm cursing Brisbane. Like, if I had played Manly, then Brisbane probably gets out to this 12-0 lead and doesn't look back. That's the crazy thing. Like, Brisbane started 12-0 in this game, regardless of the fact that Walsh was out. Like, Cobbo looked that good, and Manly's been flailing recently. So it said a lot about Manly, the ability to fight back. And I thought it was just through the class of the right side attack, which you alluded to, is orchestrated by DCE, but you get Hamoli back and Ruben Garrick out there. I do wonder, like, has something happened to Luke Brooks? He's not the same exciting player that he was in the first few rounds either. I get that you're neutralized a little bit on the left when you don't have the threat of Turbo sweeping out the back, but Manly will become a bit too predictable to defend if the only threat is to the right side. I don't know if it's just me or if Brooks is not as dangerous as he kind of looked, and that looked to be almost like the signing of the offseason. So anyway, just with the ability to attack to the right and the ability to hold Brisbane out for like an hour straight, 60 straight minutes in this game, it's 12 all. So that's what you're talking about. The game's there for the taking. And ironically, it's a very soft penalty against Manly because, of course, they were the recipients of a very soft penalty that nearly got them the victory against the Finns, though the Dolphins scored one more try after that. So I don't know if Manly can complain too much, but that soft penalty late in the count sets up Brisbane to slot the winning field goals. If you're going to give any credit to Brisbane, you can obviously say that even when star players are out, they're getting it done, albeit only just. And what is more consistent, I think, than the attack, which I've tried to say is not sustainable, is the defense. Like, that Brisbane defense, if you defend well, then you always have a chance to win games. You probably shouldn't win all of them, but you hold an opponent to 12 points, you're going to win the majority.
And I think for me, the thing with Brisbane is, and what we know about getting to grand finals, you kind of need to finish inside that top four to be a genuine chance. I think it goes back a long time looking at someone who's won outside of the top four there. And this is a performance where I look at it and I go, look, it's great they got the win. Absolutely, take the 2 points where you can. But I didn't watch the performance and go, yeah, they can still finish top four. So I still do have some question marks whilst acknowledging it's great to get the win, missing so many key players there. Alrighty, Titans v Knights, guys. Let's talk about the robbery. No, I'm only joking. Biggest talking point from this game, though, was the no try decision there from Brian Kelly. Go ahead, everyone that's live. Let us know in the comments here, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. What did you think? At the ground live, I thought it was a try. Watching it back on replay, you can see some separation with the ball. What stings, I suppose, as a Titans fan is I thought that was more of a try than Philip Sammy's was a try against the Storm. So there's a little bit of inconsistency there, but that's the ebbs and flows of footy. Some weeks you get the call, some weeks you don't. Outside of that, like, the Knights have a 4-game winning streak right now, mate. And that's flown under the radar because, with the greatest of respect to a 4-game winning streak here to the Knights, it's not necessarily been one great or entertaining win in there. It's been a very bland, patient style of footy where, I don't know, they're just camouflaged there on the ladder right now. And people come in, and I've probably been against them most of those weeks, I think. I've probably tipped against them all 4 of the weeks, to be honest with you, and they just find a way to get the job done. So that is impressive there by the Knights. Biggest takeaway for me, though, a little bit of a bias towards my Titans, but I truly believe as a long-suffering Titans fan, although we're losing all these tight games and our last 7 have been decided by 4 or less points, I think we will lose more games this year than we won last year. But in the losses, we're showing more than we showed in last year's losses. Some of last year's losses were just diabolical. None more so than one we watched together at Suncorp with the Dolphins and Titans. Like, that's diabolical. We're losing this year, and you kind of go, well, it wasn't that bad. Like, we were close. We were close against a side that was on a 3-game win streak in the Knights here. So I'm happy with that. There's actual improvements, and that same belief I had in the preseason when I said we'd finish top 8, it's actually based on improvements now, not just kind of optimism and hoping that certain signings with Des Hasler, etc., worked out. So excited for our future despite this loss here. What we really need to know, though, have the Titans have they screwed your trust with them permanently and scarred you like they have me? Or are you going to tip us again for finals next year?
Look, it's a very worrying trend, really, when you think that there's a lot of similarity in these games. I mean, last week Cowboys? You're up
last week's Cows.
20-0. You're up 20-0 at halftime. Like you nearly lost that game. Like that, you can't lose a game where you're winning 20-0. Was it? And didn't even score after halftime and lead like 24-0. In any case, like,
but we did have some injuries as well.
Yeah, and the Warriors game, which again you won, but you were down 12-0. Then you were up 27-12, and again you had to hold on for dear life to win that game. And here you're down 10-0. And understandably, you got 4 key spine members out, and then Jolliffe does a peck early, and the Knights have jumped you. And I'm thinking, yeah, this is kind of the bridge too far for the Titans with the players they've got out, and the Knights are, fighting hard every week. But then you've scored the next 5 tries, and so you're like reasonably pleased that your team's in the fight, and that's a decent stat that like 7 in a row decided by 1 try shows you in each and every game. But again, like you shouldn't lose any game where you score 5 straight tries, and you shouldn't lose any game where you lead by 14 points in a second half. Not saying it will never happen, but it's a bad loss no matter what the circumstances. Pretty much, you've just got to, like, the good teams will find a way to hang on there, even with the injuries notwithstanding. But the Knights, you're right about under the radar, like, and that's all since losing Ponga. And you talk about the Titans games all being tight. All these Knights games are tight as well. Like the Dolphins win, the Warriors win, the Tigers win, and then this win. They're all like right around a 4-point, 1 try margin. Like you could change one moment. They could have lost these, but they're well deserved. It's kind of suits the town. They're workmanlike wins. And although Ponga is out, you've unearthed Armstrong, who had a hat trick on Saturday afternoon, electrifying the Magic Round crowd. So it was a super exciting game. I do think that the Titans have let that one slip. I do think it's a really stiff call at the end of the game to get the Kelly try, and it's given a try, and that's going to level the score and give you a chance to kick to go in front. And of course, Shop had missed basically from in front earlier in the game as well. And it just seemed like that the bunker didn't chime in for quite a long time, which means it really took a substantial review for them to take it off. Now, I do think opinions are mixed, and I did watch a bit of Annesley's conference, and he is saying he's standing by the decision. But I do think when in doubt, he's going to try and make it sound like it was the right call to back his team. I don't like it. Like there's been worse put downs. I think there were worse put downs this weekend that were given tries. And don't forget, it was ruled on field as a try. So the bunker's like choosing to overrule, and geez, that robs the crowd and yourself of an absolute grandstand finish. You're right. Like you get the call some weeks and others you don't, but it's like when you got the call against the Storm, it didn't help you because you ultimately didn't win. Where this one, it really could have been the difference. So it still kind of hurts. But let us know in the comments. Again, I'll try and put some of the comments up on the screen, including you can respond to the one that's up on the screen right now, Clarky. I mean, you're feeling bad about the result, but you got to feel bad for Josh as well, turning up to the pod party in fancy dress.
Look, Josh was stitched up, but fortunate for himself. Good-looking rooster, great young bloke. And, you just got to play to the conditions sometimes. Josh came, played to the conditions, played smart footy, kicked to corners, and ultimately had a great day. So, well done there, Josh. And, yeah, I'm sorry that I stitched you up there. I was hoping I'd get at least one person. Josh, you are that person, unfortunately. Yeah, man, this game, it was like we were dejected in the Titans section after the air was just sucked out of the arena. You're right. In terms of consistency, that call isn't as consistent as we'd probably like in the NRL. And I actually have a theory on this because last year when Dave Fafita pushed Fogarty in the back and denied Fogarty the chance to compete, and we lost in Canberra by a try, Graham Annesley stood by that comment as well. Now, people might not know this. He's actually the former Titans CEO. So it's like I've the pressure that he feels in that role, I feel as well as a content creator, where I don't want to rank the Titans too high because it's just going to seem like I'm giving, props to my own team. I think like subconsciously he's kind of like, if it's contentious and I say that it's right for the Titans, and people are just going to think I'm being biased. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe that's just a weird theory. I've got to break out the tinfoil hat, if you will. Let's move on to Sharks v Roosters before we do that. Footy's an interesting game, man. If I told you that there's going to be a game this weekend, both sides are close to full strength. There's a team coming in, it's the form team of the competition, and the team they're versing is first, and they're the only ones that you can argue are in better form. You would not anticipate a 68-point shootout. You'd probably anticipate an Origin-style game where it's grindy and tries are hard to come by. But I think for this one, the Roosters just got away from their brand of footy. We always hear Trent Robertson say stuff like, oh, the Roosters way or Roosters football. And it seems like buzzwords, but it genuinely reminded me, I think it was the Manly performance earlier this year where they just had ridiculous errors out of their own end, put themselves under unnecessary pressure, and ultimately lacked patience and precision. That's the Roosters we got today, on the weekend, which is so disappointing because when they do play Roosters footy and are careful and poised with everything they do, so entertaining to watch. They almost got their way out of it, but a side like the Sharks is probably one of the only few that won't let them get out of it at this stage of the competition. Then I do wonder, though, how much of that belongs to the Sharks' defense? Because we know that they're the number one rated defensive side so far this year. Was it the defensive pressure that was put on the Roosters that made them succumb to those errors and ultimately force their hand a little bit too much? Who knows what it was, but facts are facts. Sharks are on a great win streak here. They sit in first. For me, they're the team to beat. And on current form, I've probably got them as genuine contenders. Would you agree with that?
Oh, they're genuine contenders for sure. And if the jury was out a couple of weeks ago, then you go down to Melbourne and win, and then people made excuses for why that win wasn't impressive. But what are you really going to say here? And the Sharks were underdogs again. And look, okay, yeah, they're a good defensive team generally, so they did put the Roosters under pressure, but you can't really give them a great deal of credit when they still conceded 30 points in this game. So clearly it shows how electric the attack is also. And I thought like the outside backs, Ramey and Iro, they outshone the Stars and the Roosters outside backs. And I thought that went a long way. Of course, the talking point leading up to the game was, is Nico in? Is he out? I think they kept it a bit under wraps as well, tried to keep the opponent guessing. And Nico was in and he was at his best. So, we didn't have that information on Tuesday. But what I found interesting was even once Nico was confirmed in, you could still get plus 4.5. Where I really thought the 4.5s earlier in the week were factoring in a decent chance that Nico would miss. And I did see a couple of people in our group, kind of say, look, Nico's confirmed in now. Now I'm taking the plus 4.5, which I think was a shrewd way to play it. Although having said that, it was a shootout, unexpected. In fact, after 5 games, this was the biggest winning margin of any of the 5. And it was, probably anticipated to be the closest of any of the games. And it's 18-all. Looks like it's going to be deadlocked at the break before the Sharkies trying to play footy off their own 20 and spill it. And with dead set 10 seconds left on the clock, the Roosters just fling it out to the left edge and actually score in the corner and go up 24-18. So that was a really tough try for the Sharks to give up, but they recovered from it. And I talked about the outside backs and Nico and the forward pack too. And like the way that Talakai has reinvented himself as an impact player, and I think his try there, I believe might have been the opening try, the second half, that kind of turned the game. And I know that the Roosters were without Joey Manu, but at this point in the competition, kind of everybody's like missing somebody here or there. It was a fair fight, and the Sharks got the better of them. And it is still crazy that only loss is to the Tigers. But other than that, the Sharks have been the most impressive side of this year and absolutely look like the real deal to me.
What else is crazy? It wasn't like the Tigers got home in a tight one. They smoked them. I think that the Sharks missed their line by like 35 to 40 points or something. It was horrible. I can see Jamin Powell on Instagram and a few other people are wanting us to speak about the Brad Arthur situation in regards to him being like, I think we'll
get to the Eels game very soon. Yeah, perfect. But tell me, Nico, 100% Blues 7? Do you wait and see what Moses does next week? Let us know in the comments too.
Yeah, let us know what you think.
Well, he's done enough, right, to get a chance this year. Leading the Dally M as well.
If you do think Nico as well, let us know who you think his halves partner should be. I'm saying Matt Burton. Would you agree with that?
Even though the Doggies let that slip, yeah, Burton wasn't really the issue. I would have Burton. And I had Burton even before the season. I think that's the best choice there.
There we go. All righty. Rabbitohs v Cowboys. Speaking of high point shootouts like we just did, we get a 50-point game between these sides. Now, do you remember my stat line on how many points these teams concede combined from the preview show?
Yeah, you said 50.
Yeah, it was 51 rounded up, but it was about 50.5.5 or something like just over. So we literally got exactly what we thought we would statistically from these sides. Our assessment was there's not going to be much defense in this one. It's just going to be a shootout of points. And if it's a shootout of points, then we both preferred the Cowboys. Just being brutally honest here on the Cowboys, I wasn't too impressed by their performance, but that's only because they haven't addressed the defensive issues. Now, I already know the Cowboys can score 28 points. They've led the league for points for a while now, or have been up there at least in the top 3 for points scored. But can they defend that same number, or even defend a number of 20? Because they couldn't against the last place Rabbitohs. So for that reason, I'm still hesitant on being on having the Cowboys rise in their stocks after this one for mine. Because I just need to see a little bit more defensive resolve from a side that I know can put on points for fun. What about yourself? How did you see it, and would you agree with that?
Yeah, what really bothers me again is like I said the last couple of weeks, like the Souths aren't dead. People are talking about them like they're dead, and it has been an automatic win going against Souths. And I took Souths a week ago. I took +6 against the Dragons, and I'd argue, even with the struggles, the Cowboys are better than the Dragons. And again, I had to hear about how terrible Souths are. How could you possibly play Souths well? There you go. The streak is broken. 16 straight losses against the spread. But game 17 with the line 8.5, South Sydney did cover. And, again, it's triggering me because that was the closest play I had that wasn't a best bet. And when you're not going well, you don't want to take the marginal plays. But obviously, if I had taken more of the leans, they're not losing at 60% like the best bets actually had. So in this case, Souths +4.5, which I spoke about, being the play I looked long and hard at on Tuesday. What did South Sydney lose the first half by? Exactly 4 points, So I obviously at 10-0 down, I was kind of glad and hoping, sorry to say, it's a bit cruel, but hoping that North Queensland would blow the Bunnies out. But of course, South Sydney fought back and then threw a Latrell Mitchell try, doing what he's capable of doing, just scoring from a position with enough defenders covering him that very few other players can. Souths are back in the game. And even late, I think the Cowboys got the lead out to 10 and Bunnies had someone in the bin and still scored to not only cover the game, but to have a chance to level it up late. And you talk about, not that this was quite the shootout of the match that preceded it, but it's good for North Queensland. They break a 5-match losing streak. That sure helps to play South Sydney. But you could still say probably the same criticism of North Queensland, that they hate defence.
That's it. I don't think either side's answered too many questions about their deficiencies in this one, which is it's interesting. It was an interesting game, but ultimately the game we expected nonetheless. I did give out 2 try scorer tips last week. Daniel Tupou hit it around $2, and Jeremiah Nano was just over $2 as well. He missed. He did get up for a kick like I thought he might, but then he offloaded. So if you did back those, you break even. Apologies, we couldn't get the win there. Mate, I had a great time for this game because I got to go into that Chemist Warehouse section at Magic Round. And Ignite Sports Management was in there. So Daly Cher Evans was there, Thomas Flegler, Stephen Kearney, and a bunch of other people. And had a really big chat to DC as well, which was cool. So not the most memorable game, but certainly will be memorable for me for many years to come. Let's go Warriors v Panthers, man. I just think for this one, you look at the injury list and then you lose Wade Egan early to a head injury and you're against the Penrith Panthers. I'm sold. I'm tipping the Panthers from that point. There's no way you can convince me that the Warriors can win from there based on their last 5 games, which they were winless in. But just one of their most impressive efforts and victories in club history. I'm not going to say it was their best win or an important win, but just in terms of facing adversity, overcoming that, I thought it was the most impressive win I can remember in a Warriors jersey. I struggled. I had to think, when was I more impressed with the Warriors after a win? And I couldn't really think of one because even like last year when they had their big moment in the semi-final against the Knights, they were pretty favourites, I believe. So they were kind of expected to win there. So nothing jumped out to me there. I'm happy to put it on the record, and it was the most impressive Warriors performance I've ever seen. Meanwhile, for the Panthers, I don't really have too many concerns. they're probably just a touch closer to the rest of the competition now due to that salary cap and losing so many players. So that invincibility that's been there for the last few years is almost gone now. And we can probably start to expect a few losses like this every now and then. I remember when they lost to the Tigers last year in Bathurst, it was kind of like, oh my God, how did they lose that? Whereas here, I didn't quite feel that way anymore because the Panthers have dropped a little bit in my books. What about you, mate? What were your thoughts on this game? And do you agree it was the Warriors' most impressive victory possibly of all time?
I mean, all time is a long time. And that's like, there's a decent, like, that while the premierships eluded them, there's still a rich history. And we all love Warriors. We all love the Warriors and love how passionate their fans are. I mean, what comes to mind to me is a win in Cronulla last year where they were like 13-point underdogs. And what was like extra impressive about that was they were down 20-0 early and actually fought all the way back and won. And I think it was pouring rain at the end. Like that was up there, but different circumstances. I mean, in this one, the line closes 15.5. You're never really meant to win as a 15.5-point underdog. Tohu Harris was scratched like day of or day before the game, which is another big out. Obviously, Johnson wasn't going to be there. You lose Egan early, as you said, but then the kickoff is out on the full. Like, is that not bad enough of a start? Before you touch the ball, Dylan Edwards is scoring in the first minute, which was the second straight game that a fullback scored a try 1 minute in because Kennedy did it the night before. Oh, sorry, not second straight game, but second straight day. Kennedy did it in the Sharks-Roosters game. But from then on, it was actually just an incredible fight like you talk about, and it was like a try-for-try game where the Warriors just wouldn't go away. And if I have to put a finger on it, of course, like that amazing determination. And I think part of it is the fans. Like, they always show up. I know there's a lot of Kiwis that live in Brisbane. You know, there's lots that like live on the Gold Coast that always come out, right? But I would also imagine that lots of Kiwis made the trip over. Think about how much hype there was and up the Wars Nation last year. Like, how many of them would have been so excited to buy their tickets? They even saw how close New Zealand went against Penrith last year, knew they were playing them for Magic Round. You know, a lot of people would have made that trip. And I would have to say those Kiwi fans would have probably been getting less and less excited for the game as this form had continued to slide. So to be rewarded with such a brave effort, and if I can suggest how they got it done, I'd probably have to say Tamari Martin, like stepping up when other halves are out and the three try assists and you still give away a penalty with a couple minutes to go and give Penrith that chance to rip your heart out. But Edwards, not the first choice kicker. Yes, it was in front, but it was a good 38 metres out. Can't ice it. And I think that the deserving side got a win there. And yeah, huge congratulations. I'll give them absolutely the win of the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great game to watch. I especially loved Dylan Edwards scoring first, having the number one on my toppy bonus bet slip at the bet party. So that was awesome for me there. Let's move into Storm v Eels. We'll recap the game quickly, then we'll spend maybe 5 minutes on Brad Arthur. I actually went against you here. I remember we spoke at the punt party, and what was your best bet here?
+6.5 first half.
I got -5.5 Storm, so we both won.
Yes, which is exactly what I talked about on Thursday. I said, like, I'm taking a team not many people will like. If you disagree with me, you didn't have to play -6.5 because it was available between 4.5 and 6.5, and that's the advantage we have as punters. And I said, you might be right and you might win. The Storm might win beyond 6. But even if I'm right, you might win if it lands on 6, a common halftime margin, which is exactly what the last two games of the round did land on.
And then the craziest thing from there is, so like we both cash our bet there. Awesome. Best bet gets up. Cameron Munster then gets ruled out with what looked to be a very serious groin injury. So you'd think that the Eels are going to be in this and continue to kick on and fight. And somehow the Storm just went to a new level. There was an air of freedom to everything they did without having that genuine half there. It was like Tyron Wishart was playing as another fullback and Harry Grant was directing everything from dummy half. His ruck deception and creativity just had the Eels defensive line on the back foot, and it was the weakest thing I've seen since our hands versus Dan at the Dan Narki's blackjack table at the punt party. That's how weak it was. Disappointing for the Eels there, man. I'm just looking now at the Eels as the side where I'm looking for reasons they're going to respond. and I want to find that market value. I'm not sure who they're playing this week. I'm not sure if the coach being sacked might be that response, but this Eels side is better than what's leading on here. And I think for us as punters, it's just about finding what's going to make them respond and how do we find that value in the market. Would you agree with that? And how do you see this game?
For sure. The ultimately the fact that Para gave up is such a worrying sign. And that's why, you don't play a first half line if you think a team's going to get blown out. So I thought Para could make a game of this. So I got that wrong. And if you tell me, okay, we go back in time, we're playing the game again, like you can have 6.5 first half, which still did beat the market, right? Because it closed 4.5, 5.5, and it won. I don't want that bet again. You're going to make bets that you're going to regret through a year. So it's kind of crazy that that actually was a winner. But then there's other bets that I don't regret that, even though they lost. That's what I mean, I suppose, between the difference between what's a good or a bad tip versus a good or a bad result. Now, I was lucky for a few reasons. If we talk about the bet itself, you had plus 6.5. It lands exactly 6. It's always lucky when you win by half a point. It's the first time this season, and we're at exactly 40 bets. It's the first time we're actually beating the closing number was the difference between winning or losing. And you'd expect that to help you 1 in 15. It's helped us 1 in 40. So it hasn't been very handy, but we waited 38 bets and then we finally got, landing on a key number. Thanks to a try with 5 minutes to go in the half and a sideline conversion. So you're going to tell me I was damn lucky to get that win there. But I am also going to argue back and say, are we sure Kamikamica got that put down? There certainly will look like a lot closer at other put downs like the Kelly one. I definitely saw the ball shifting when Kamikamica's putting it down. And when you're being tackled and the ball is moving, it's pretty impossible for it to not at any point come in contact with the opponent, right? When there's a guy wrapped around you. So I don't know, but is that just me? It doesn't matter now because the bet won, and I'm still a bit salty about it. But I don't think I've had a single bet this year where a team got a bogus try. But I know there's been a few against me. I know that. And the other thing is, yes, the game blows out, but, you do play first half for a reason, that you fear the ability of Melbourne to kind of totally take the game away from you in the last 20. And you look at, although Pappenhausen's out, and even once Munster was out, you're right, you kind of feel like Para should be in the game. Farlongo is just frightening. It was terrifying betting against him. I don't want to have that experience too many more times. And I'm looking at that game going, someone else has got to sign him. But in fairness, out of 17 teams in the comp, 15 of them are probably happy with their fullback. I don't know, throw out there, anyone, would you take Farlongo? He's probably too small to play any other position. I know he did all right on the wing against the Titans, but he's still so young in his NRL career and is absolutely electric. Not that the first choice bloke in Pappenhausen isn't, but especially once the fatigue set into that game, Farlongo was among many Storm players that Parramatta couldn't handle. It gave up. And if we transition from that to that was obviously the last straw for Brad Arthur. It's tough. I think he's a really good coach, and I think he will get an opportunity somewhere else and has the ability to do well. Took Parramatta to a grand final just 2 years ago or 18 months ago. Met one of the most historically powerful teams of all time. Obviously, Penrith has been great for 4 years, but particularly 2022 when they still had Coruscant, I'd say that was probably them at the peak of their powers. It was almost an unwinnable grand final. And also think even a great coach, their message eventually stops getting through. You know what I mean? You might just need a new voice, and it's not necessarily the fault of the coach, but it's just if the way that you're trying to get the team to play ultimately doesn't bring the results, you're not going to get unlimited rope. And this season's slipping away very fast for Parramatta, so it's understandable. Have you got anything more kind of on the game? We talked about the Munster injury, really tough to see. But anything else on the game or kind of what you would say about the Arthur news?
I think my final point on the game is the most concerning thing for the Eels was it's not often we see a team quit in the NRL or seemingly quit. It's now happened 2 times this season for the Eels, so I think that is very concerning and would have been a factor that led to Brad Arthur's removal. I suppose for me, I do echo most of your thoughts. I think he's a quality coach. I think he'll be picked up again. It's just a matter of when, not if. Kind of like the Des Hazell situation, had to sit on the sideline for a few years until the right opportunity came up. That came up with the Titans. We don't know what the future holds for other coaches in the NRL, but Brad Arthur should be an NRL coach. He's very, very good. The results speak for themselves there. And I'm not too sure what happened there because, the players have come out in the media and said stuff as powerful before as I'd die for Brad and that we love him and he has the whole locker room support. So, yeah, interesting point you make because the point obviously wasn't getting through to his team, but seemingly they had a great relationship with him and really enjoyed. Where do you think the Eels go from here? Like, is there anyone that jumps out to you think they should sign as their next head coach?
I hadn't even thought that far, eh? Like that news did kind of catch me by surprise, and maybe I'll look at it a little bit more tomorrow. Like, who's the interim?
Trent Barrett.
Do we know? Yeah, right. That's right. So like, if he does well, he could get that would be a third go round for Baz. But
I wouldn't do that personally, though.
He'd have that possibility. Had they made this move a month ago, could they have gotten Wayne Bennett before Souths did? Potentially. No one else kind of jumps to mind, but maybe you can throw a name out there or someone else in the comments will, or once I have more time to think about it, I might suggest tomorrow in the preview pod.
Yeah, I think let's leave it for the preview pod and do a little 2-minute section on it there so we can have a proper look and we'll give our answer there. That makes most sense rather than trying to rattle it off the top of our head. And we will move to the final game of the round, which was the Tigers v Dolphins. Another week where it was the Tigers v Tigers because the sin bins are just like, guys, come on. There are improvements all throughout this Tigers football side, all throughout in defense, in attack. They are playing some really great footy in patches. The modern style of coaching that Benji has brung and the systems and structures, I suppose, in their attack absolutely suit more than what was there with Tim Sheens. I thought Tim Sheens was kind of stuck in the old version of rugby league, which is, grind them down, slow the ruck, win them through the middle with bigger forwards. And we know now you want explosive forwards that are going to offload and you want to be getting those 6-to-goes and increasing the speed of the ruck rather than the opposite. And that's something Benji's done really, really well. But it's not only their discipline, it's their decision-making under pressure that's really, really poor. And I can only imagine that's going to be built with experience in football and having a few more marquee signings or experienced players there, which Jerome Luai will bring next year. So Dolphins, I thought they just did enough. It was a game where I wasn't overly impressed. They don't rise in my books for this, but I was certainly you take a win when you can get it. They go 2-0 over the Tigers this year. But for the Tigers, I do leave this seeing the same positives that I've seen the last few weeks. It's just not quite translating into wins yet, but I'm seeing enough that I think it will translate into wins for 2025 with Jerome Luai there and another preseason under Benji. What were your thoughts on this one, though, mate? Obviously, great when the Dolphins win, but was your line 11.5 or 12.5 for the Tigers?
11.5. So people at the punt parties got to see me absolutely ride that best bet, that Eels first half best bet with an inch of its life. And then again, the Tigers line against the Finns, and we had one lose by half a point, one win by half a point. Probably what I deserve to go 1-1. But obviously, once you get the Eels win, you want to win this game. And this game I felt was more deserving. And I don't swear on the pod, but people who saw me in person, I hope I didn't shock anyone. I do swear in person when I'm watching a game like this. And I mean, a few comments. So the comment there, DJ Kaisi, 6 sin bins in the last 4 games for the Tigers. Like, discipline is important. But you talk about, a bit of inexperience. We kind of think of them as a young up-and-coming team. They've got a young up-and-coming head coach. And you talk about Tigers against themselves. It's Tigers against Brent Naden. And I said this a week ago, and I couldn't believe he even got picked. And I honestly think it's like he's beaten the best bets on his own 2 weeks in a row. And he's not inexperienced. He's played in the NRL since 2017. And he hasn't always been on bad teams. He played for the Penrith Panthers. And you have to know. And when it's a wet, greasy game and there's a minute and a half to go in the first half and you're on your own 20, you actually don't try and run around the opposition and just get pushed over the sideline and cost your team a try. And when there's 30 seconds to go in the half and your team has fought really hard and you're within a try and it's 6 tackle and a guy falls on a ball and it's about to be your ball, you actually don't run over and cheap shot him and smack him in the head. And the moment he did that, I said, that's a sin bin. Like, other people are like, oh, there's nothing in it. Like, I just knew It's just, like, I don't know what goes through his head. Like, that absolutely kills you. Like, the Dolphins could have actually taken the 2 there. The Dolphins could have scored there. But regardless, the fact that the Tigers survived those final 40 seconds, it's still the next 9 minutes of the second half. You've got to play a man short, which obviously gets compounded when Olam goes for a hip drop, which, like, I'm not going to blame every player that ever commits a hip drop, because I understand, like, it's a lot easier said than done, and the tackle gets out of control. If you want to say when you're 13 on 12, like, you really need your discipline to be on point. But again, Olam's not an inexperienced player. And again, he's come from like a much more disciplined system. So that hurts you. But I almost feel like, again, whose fault is it that you're playing 13 on 11? It's Brent Naden, because he chose to do that. Like, that's something you definitely can control, where a tackle you may not always be able to. And despite all that, and despite that it was 13 on 11, and despite the fact that the Dolphins got a very, very sketchy try, which once again actually happened when they didn't have the ball. It was actually the Tigers with 11 men on a roll, making a half line break, spilling the ball. That's one thing. Into Marshall King, back into a Tiger. Let me know in the comments. Annesley defended that one as well, if you can believe. And then into the lap of none other than the Hammer, and it's obviously shut the gate. He takes it 80 meters. I'm used to seeing that, and I get it as well. People will tell me, "Oh, you bet against a team that had the Hammer in it, so like that's going to happen." No, tries like that don't happen every week. They are pretty fluky. Despite all that, it was still game on. It was still 18-12 with, like, in the final 20 minutes. I'm still happy with plus 11.5. But the last try, again, is also the Hammer. Tigers had opportunities, couldn't quite take them. You know, Zarko was 4 of 4 from kicks, including one from the sideline earlier. We lose the game by 12 when we had 11.5. And I want to address some comments too, like the line got to 12.5, which I hate to see, because when I give out a best bet, I am saying bet it now. I'm saying it's a really good bet. I don't give out like conditional best bets. Like, I know you could, in theoretically, like, come out on Tuesday and say, look, everyone, if this line gets to this number, bet it. But the funny thing is, if you're telling people that, then you're telling people what's a good bet. Then other people will get on earlier and not let that number get to that. So I thought it was good enough value at double digits. And I still just kind of feel like, why do you take a team plus 10.5 or 11.5? Because you actually think they're a chance. You think it's not a mismatch. And it was a competitive game. So I kind of got the game I wanted. And I had a player that completely sabotaged his team again. And I had a very sketchy try. And I had Izaka, who's actually missed a few kicks this year, not missed one. And we lost by half a point. Because someone put in the comments, like, I know there's a comment, Izaka, elite goal kicker. He was last year, but I swear he struggled this year. I don't know. Fact check me on that. There was a comment earlier, like, and, you know, is my issue kind of coming up with the best bets on a Tuesday? I mean, to be fair, that was on a Thursday. And I think that the Tigers line was only 8.5 on Tuesday, and actually went up another 2 points and gave me that opportunity, which in a sick way also cost me, because I liked the Tigers. And I'll tell you why. I'm not saying, if it hadn't gone above 10, I wouldn't have played it. But if I like a team plus 8.5, I might go either team 1 to 12. But if the line gets to 11.5, I'm not going to go either team 1 to 12, because the possibility of the underdog winning 13 plus is still greater than the favorite winning by exactly 12. So it's like, because the line was even better on Thursday, I took it that way. But ultimately, I didn't think that line would go through 12.5. I would never share a tip and say, take 11.5, even though I think it's going to go through another key number. I was surprised. Maybe just upon reflection, I don't think it was, sharp bettors taking that. I just think it was the last game of the weekend. I reckon the punters didn't even go that well this weekend. Majority of underdogs covered, and everyone just kind of saw what the Storm did to the Eels and said, like, I'm taking the safer bet. I'm taking the more logical play. I'm taking Dolphins. And I think weight of money pushed that, through 12. And obviously, if you took 11.5, you're going to feel that you had a great bet with the Dolphins. Where I'm going to tell you, like, you want a team to be more in control generally if you're going to lay double digits. I think it's just another one that I'm not saying Tigers was an outstanding bet, but it's another one that's absolutely in the balance and just can't seem to win it.
Mate, you're absolutely right, because I was set to play the 11.5 line whilst we're at the punt party, and I thought I'm going to wait and see, because I think more people will just jump on the favourite here blindly. And I know you and I both thought the Tigers were a half decent chance when we did our I know that I thought that when we did our preview show on Tuesday. So I was happy when it pushed to 12. I thought that was really lucky. But of course, all the punters that did jump on at that point, minus 12.5 for the Dolphins, lose as well. By half a point.
Sure, and there would have been a lot of people that, did just, like a lot of people do just bet just before the game, right, what's the next game, what am I going to bet, what's in my same game multi, or not everyone bets line either. Like, obviously people love margin betting, and lots of people would have bet 13 plus on the Dolphins even earlier in the week, thinking that's a pretty safe bet. And I'm trying to warn you that it wasn't the safest bet. So depending on how you played it, maybe you did win. Obviously I did not. Again, if it was 12.5 on Thursday, you're also starting to look at, well, now there's a 6.5 first half available, which also would have won because they are down 6.5 times. So it's like, that's part of it, trying to judge the game correctly, which I'm not going to do every time. And then part of it is, how do we execute the bet correctly to get like the best likelihood bet that fits our opinion? And my execution didn't pay off this time. It wasn't good enough because the line increased. But I guess, of course, I could say my record would be better if I was able to like bet on game day, if I had that ability. I try and make it as easy to follow as possible, but only sharing best bets on the pod. And then it's not like, if you're a listener or a viewer, you're going to come in on the recap and you're going to say, oh, and if everyone saw in the group 15 minutes before the Sharks kicked off, I tipped Sharks plus 4.5. People are going to say, oh, I missed that. So I try and make it easy to follow. It hurts me for a number of reasons. I got to meet so many awesome people on Sunday at the punt party. And, there's people that put their money on these tips, and that hurts. But also, the tips are meant to keep my opinions accountable, to show like what I'm talking about each week is valid. And so I feel like I lose validity when these tips keep going down. But if you actually listen to the way I talk about the game playing out, not as many of them are wrong as the bet results would tell you. But it's not fair for me to say, if I had the ability to bet on game day for all of these, I'd win a bunch more, because, yeah, sometimes you think something's a really good bet at a certain number, you want to play it, because if you're right, other people might see it too, and the line can go, the other direction.
Well, I reckon let's get you with Josh next year, so he's not the only one dressed up a little bit silly. Let's get you an I Love Brent Naden t-shirt. I reckon that'll just look perfect on you. Just, I love Brent Naden. And just maybe just his face just photoshopped on it as well. Would you be happy to wear that?
This week, and if he does, he'll probably be man of the match. Knowing
no, he got suspended he'll get suspended for one game.
Oh, so, yes, of course.
We can safely tip Tigers without Brent Naden there for 1 week at least.
And I was thinking 3 weeks ago, that's my one brain snap for the year. An outside back on final tackle, just smashing someone in the head in a tight game. But it's happened twice in a month. Now, yes. How many more years do I have to bet to get two players to just hit someone who's lying on the ground and get sin binned? That wins me a bet. It could be longer than I live for, that's for sure.
Yeah, that does not seem like something that I would back as a likely occurrence, particularly to happen in a month. Very unlucky. But look, off field, great results this weekend. Great punt party. Great to meet everyone on field. We'll keep chipping away, keep working on getting that record back up throughout the season. At this point, I think we will close the show. We'll just sneak in under an hour. So thank you so much to everyone for the weekend, in particular those that attended, and for being here tonight live or listening as a podcast. We both absolutely appreciate you. And we will see you tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. for our Round 12 preview, which is also Indigenous Round. Looking forward to it. Over to you. We need to farewell the show.
Thanks to everyone that's tuning in tonight. Michael says, how good were the T-Wolves today? Like, there were a couple of cracking NBA Game 7s today. That's one bright spark, at least with the pod. Like, my NBA tips, we've had some really good results. And my $11 tip, Timberwolves are into $1.50, but counts for very little, especially the people that want the rugby league bets to do better. see how we go tomorrow. You and I said we'd keep this pod around half an hour, and somehow there was still that much to say that we're hitting 60 minutes. Sorry, because I did say it'd be short and sharp, but we'll get out before 60. Lego.